Well, a very good afternoon to you. Welcome to this wonderful session. We'll be tackling Ethiopia Diaspora Mapping Report. And I hope everyone can hear me loud and clear. I love my background. I don't know how the rest of the panelists look this wonderful afternoon. I'll kindly request that you have your cameras on. I think that will be very important for us, just to see you. Like I look at the picture on the poster, my picture on the poster, and I see a lot of disparity with the real me. Yeah, that's not my case to compare the two. I was just to see your beautiful faces this wonderful afternoon. Yes, thank you very much. Rahma, I can see you looking amazing. Sophie, I can see you. Welcome. So this is going to be an amazing session just to understand, because when you talk about Africa, and the economy on a global scale is always about the future is in Africa. But how about the present? Or if you're building a future, what are we doing presently? And that means that being intentional to make sure that our businesses are well funded. That's what we'll be looking at in this particular report. Just to make sure that we understand the Ethiopian ecosystem, how they channel their remittances, how those remittances are utilized, and what you can do better. I think that's the end goal. What can we do better to make sure that the Ethiopian startup ecosystem and also the small and medium-sized enterprises are getting the well-needed funds? But that aside, my name is Noki Keboy, and I'm really honored to be your host this wonderful afternoon. I'm not Ethiopian, but I have some Ethiopian friends, as some people would say. I can't remember their names, but it's an amazing, amazing country with awesome culture and even better flag. I love the colors. Well, without wasting much time, I'd like to welcome all of you. Remember this engagement, it's being streamed live on our social media platforms. So we have quite a number of hashtags that we're going to be utilizing in our discussion. We have hashtag SIDA, hashtag Pangea Trust. We have hashtag remittances. That's quite a lot. Yeah, but I think one of the critical hashtags that we can utilize is Ethiopia Diaspora, mapping. Hashtag Ethiopia Diaspora mapping. That would be a good hashtag to encapsulate what we're focusing on this afternoon. So without wasting much time, it's already 3 minutes past 2:30. I'd like to make sure that our people who are giving us their welcoming remarks, they are ready and are well furnished to take part in this particular discussion. So without wasting much time, I would like to welcome, first of all, to give us an opening remarks rather, and set the foundation in terms of Pangea Trust and program background, and also what Pangea has been doing and what to expect in the next, hopefully 2 hours in this particular report. So without wasting much time, I'd like to welcome Anne Lawi, who's the Pangea Trust Managing Director, to give us the opening remarks and also to set the foundation for our discussions today. Anne Lawi, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Noah, and I appreciate you hosting us and very nice welcoming remarks. Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning for those who might be in different continents. We are very pleased to have all of you here. Very honored to host all of you. And also looking forward to share some of the feedback and some of the findings and recommendations that we have been able to put together as part of the diaspora mapping Ethiopia. We have been on this journey for around 15 months now. We have done the same diaspora mapping study for Kenya that we shared some of the insights and findings and recommendations that have shaped the conversation when it comes to diaspora remittances, utilization, motivation for investment, and attitudes, and how we can build transparent platforms and products to harness more diaspora as investments towards African founded startups. I would request if you can share my presentation kindly. But I am happy to start to start. But kindly, if you can share the screen. Okay. All right. So Pangea Trust has been operating for around 3 years now. We are working towards unlocking remittances as investment towards impact-driven startup across Africa. And for us, it's a very passionate journey because we know a biggest challenge and constraint for business across Africa is finance. It's access to finance. And for us, we set out to find out what are the key motivations, what do we need to put in place, what data insights that we need to gather to inform the process of creating a platform or a solution that can be able to harness and channel investor, or rather unlock investment towards African-founded startup. Across the years that we have been in operation, we have worked with 150 startups across Africa. 46% of those that we have worked with are women-founded, and up to 15% of those that we have worked with have been able to 15x their investment within the 2 years. Kindly, if you can share the presentation so that the audience can be able to follow through with me. Thank you. Just to zoom in the country perspective, that is Ethiopia. Startup and SMEs in Ethiopia generate 7 out of 10 jobs in the country. That is according to the World Bank report. Also, according to the World Bank, startup and SMEs represent up to 90% registered businesses in Ethiopia. Yet, access to finance is a key constraint for business growth, as cited by more than 200 businesses that we interviewed out of this process. Furthermore, the International Finance Corporation, IFC, estimates up to 80% of startups and SMEs have unmet finance needs since they don't meet the funding criteria for mainstream funding structures. And to zoom into a global perspective, if you can move to the next slide, to zoom to a global perspective, startup and MSMEs represent up to 95% of registered firms worldwide. So it's a huge segment of businesses that we are talking about here, and contribute more than that 5% of GDPs in the emerging markets. They also account for more than 50% of jobs, and yet they still are significantly served by financial institutions. And therefore, there is a need to create an alternative funding mechanism. And that's where we see a huge opportunity for us as an organization to be able to unlock and create support mechanism to grow startups and SMEs that unlock alternative investment options that can eliminate the barriers that we have just seen, and also explore diaspora remittances as an opportunity. So some of the constraints that we have found out, if you can move to the next slide, some of the constraining factors, according to the report that we're just unveiling today and seeking your inputs on, startups and MSMEs transact in local currency, and banks have more favorable deals for those who are paying in foreign currency in Ethiopia. Typically, most SMEs and startups have no collateral to put up when requesting for loans or capital, which make it difficult for them to access finance. According to the World Bank, startup and SMEs represent up to 90% of registered business in Ethiopia. There is also culture and economic reasons that make it hard for local SMEs to access finance, such as most businesses owners are scared to ask for loans as credit. And as this is not socially accepted and loans-oriented people are not culturally favored. There is also information asymmetry in which people do not necessarily know where to get money. But in contrast, when diaspora are attempting to open a business in Ethiopia, they know where and what to borrow and how to negotiate for best terms, and do not mind knocking on doors to do so. It's also assumed that diaspora members have more collateral and have the guarantee of working and living in better monetized economy. In addition, lack of access to finance, SMEs also have difficulties in access to market, ease of doing business, and the market not being ready for their product and service, and access to information. Also, lack of access to market in Ethiopia is caused by decentralized marketplace, lack of innovative marketing and sales strategies, and also a closed economy, hardly no existing B2B collaboration or market linkages. And that's where we see an opportunity to create an alternative investment mechanism. And these projects, in partnership and funded by our partner, SIDA, also supported by SIDA embassies across the 3 countries, seek to evaluate and explore what are the opportunities that we can be able to unlock and address some of these challenges, and what are those mechanisms that we can be able to put in place to be able to address some of these challenges. Most of these have been already highlighted in the report that we'll be going through, and some of the consultants that we have been working with on this journey will be sharing more on the report. We see a huge opportunity in exploring diaspora remittances as investment, as around 900 Ethiopian lives abroad. And in 2020, diaspora remittance inflow into the country stood at 2.5 billion. This is where we see a possible increase of share of remittances set aside as investment to increase up to 25 to 30% by 2030. And that's the goal we are setting for ourselves as Pangea Trust, to see, to put in place structures and mechanisms that will be able to unlock diaspora remittances that can translate to up to 125 million that can be available as investment for startup and SMEs in Ethiopia and across the continent. As part of the project, Pangea Trust, through the support of SIDA, has been implementing diaspora innovative partnership initiative that strive to bring together African diaspora investors, startup and high growth businesses in Ethiopia, Kenya and Somalia, as the project was focusing in 3 countries. And one of the key activities was to start with diaspora remittances, or rather to have a diaspora remittance mapping study to gather data, to gather insight, and be able to harness insights on how we can create data-driven mechanism that will be able to unlock diaspora remittances as investment. If you can move to the next slide, please. Kindly, if you can move to the next slide, please. Next slide. So the project had 4 key pillars. Like I mentioned, the diaspora remittance mapping report that put together, or rather brought out key insights to inform the development of diaspora innovative platform and tools that will be able to, 1, mobilize diaspora networks, secondly, create a channel and transparency process of channeling the diaspora remittances as investment. And that unlock institutional partnerships that can be able to harness and expand mechanism of unlocking these diaspora remittances, as well as ensure that explore how can we also include Islamic finance as an option also for unlocking investment options for the businesses across the continent. Some of the, so you can go to the next slide, please. for the diaspora remittance mapping study for Ethiopia, we focused to establish what is the state of remittance into the Africa continent. In this case, starting with Kenya, we started with Kenya and followed with Ethiopia, Somalia, focusing on 3 countries. Today, we are focusing on just doing a deep dive of our findings and recommendations for Ethiopia, and also trying to establish what are the similarities and contrasts for those 3 countries, and how can we utilize the findings to build on harnessing diaspora remittances as investment. Also, we wanted to establish what are the alternative or preferred channels, motivation and attitude that can drive investment in Africa, and as well as investment appetite and drivers. We also wanted to establish challenges and opportunities unlocking diaspora remittances as investments. And finally, also exploring Islamic financing as an area. What are the opportunities and key challenges that we can embed as part of the process? So some of the stats, as I conclude, that have come out of this process include that recipients of money sent are 27% who are parents of diaspora living abroad into the home country, in this case Ethiopia. Also 13% of the remittance inflows goes to friends, and 13% of this goes to siblings. Another key insight is that 24% of the recipients of these remittances inflow used online money transfer. And this is key insights because we are trying to explore what are the digital platform we can create, what are the preferences and why, what are the key functionalities that we can put to be able to harness, or rather to increase the trust aspect of diaspora remittances as investments. Key findings that we have also found, and I would want to mention among other findings, is that 71% of women who are part of this insight expressed interest in investing in women-led businesses. Also, up to 60% of respondents of this process were open to Islamic finance as a finance option for supporting businesses. So these are some of the findings, and we have all of them captured in the report. We'll be having some of my colleagues also deep diving on these findings and recommendations, and also sharing insight what this means. And for us, this is a very exciting opportunity because the data supports that there is an opportunity. We just need to put the right tools, mobilize the right people, be in the right groups and networks to be able to make this happen. And that's what we are setting out, and we are grateful to the support that we have received from SIDA as a key partner in this process. And we are looking forward to see how we can scale this to more countries. So thank you so much.
Right, thank you very much, Anne Lowry, for that detailed introduction and laying the ground. And observing from the comments of our participants, right, they're asking, I mean, why is this report important? And later on, when we go into a deep dive into this particular report, we'll be able to understand the dynamics of how remittances are critical to a particular economy, that is one, but also look at the opportunities. Now you say, oh, I'm in Kenya, I'm in Uganda, I'm in a different country. Why is that important? One of the things that we've been pushing is the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, opening up the continent to do business. So it will also be critical to understand the SME ecosystem, because those are the majority of the businesses in this particular continent, and Ethiopia is no exception. I mean, 90% of businesses in Ethiopia fall under the SME category. So what are the opportunities in this particular ecosystem, and how can you plug in? That will be very important. But thank you very much, Anne, for your opening remarks at this particular moment. You understand that partnership is very critical when it comes to achieving such a report, So, and in this particular journey of diaspora mapping for Ethiopia, to be specific, it has also been very helpful. That's why I'd like to welcome Sophie Bergholt, who's the Senior Advisor for Private Sector Development at the Swedish International Development Cooperation Agency, HQ. Sophie, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Noah, for the kind introduction, and good afternoon to all of you. SIDA is a Swedish government agency for international development cooperation. And as a development financier, but also as a close collaboration partner, we are ready to co-create with you to build on the findings based on the diaspora mapping report. We therefore welcome this validation workshop. SIDA's geographical main focus is Africa, and we have national cooperation agreements with 15 countries in Africa, and Ethiopia is one of these prioritized countries. According to the strategy with Ethiopia, we commit to contribute to development results in areas such as human rights, democracy and rule of law, environment, climate, and economic resilience, as well as social protection. My colleague Lul from the Swedish Embassy in Addis will say a few words later in relation to the bilateral development strategy for Ethiopia. National development in any country requires a combination of various financial resources. One such untapped financial resource are remittances. So we need to find ways to leverage also these financial flows. According to the National Bank of Ethiopia, volume of remittance in 2020 reached around $3.8 billion, accounting for 0.6% of GDP. This is a substantial financial flow, or even a very substantial financial flow. I appreciate how the report succeeds to bring out findings not only relevant for this specific initiative as explained by Anne, but also to increase the overall awareness of the role of the diaspora and remittances. What you and we together are now doing in Ethiopia is for us also of global importance and interest. Our SIDA's and Sweden's collaboration in this partnership aims to enable Pangea Trust to mobilize the diaspora also globally, building on the experiences that we are now gaining in Ethiopia. For the world to reach the 2030 sustainable goals, Sweden has committed to engage new partners. The diaspora constitutes one of these. We see the diaspora as a largely untapped resource for inclusive economic growth and job creation in development countries and in Ethiopia. The world is changing rapidly, and Swedish development cooperation needs to be flexible to meet challenges and identify new opportunities. So together with new partners, we want to test and develop new innovative solutions to combat poverty and inequality. Again, I welcome all of you to this workshop, and I appreciate your contribution to this initiative. We are here today to tap into your work and your knowledge, since you know how we best can be relevant to the Ethiopian country context. We therefore in particular look forward to learn more from each and every one of you. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you very much, Sophie, for setting ground of how critical bilateral relations are to achieving what we all want to achieve: proper funding for our startup ecosystem and also for our micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises. And I'm glad you already teased our next speaker. So without wasting much time, I would like to welcome Lul Wondermehe, who is the program manager at SIDA Embassy of Ethiopia. Lul, the floor is yours. All right. As we wait for Lul to onboard, remember, conversation is ongoing at the chat box. If you have any question, if you have any comment, just comment fire there and it will be picked up. I understand a lot of people are asking these wonderful presentations. I mean, where are we going to get them? Trust you me, we're going to share the beautiful presentation. We are also recording this so that you're able to share with other people. Remember, information is power. And as Anne was presenting, she noted that one of the things is that we have information gap. I mean, there is just lack of people not knowing. And I believe that you sharing this particular webinar, especially on the opportunities of investment in startups and SMEs in Ethiopia, will be very important for our viewers. With that said, I don't know whether we have Lul with us, ready to give his remarks quickly. Thank you very much. Lul, do we have you on board? All right. Before you come on board, remember later on, we're going to be having a deep dive, because a lot of you are asking, okay, these presentations are already brief enough. Do we have a deeper understanding? And that's what we're going to be doing later on, briefly, just to understand what are the dynamics therein and what can we do. Look at the Ethiopian numbers, over close to 900,000 people in the diaspora. I mean, what does that mean? How much are they sending home? And how can we channel that to make sure that the startup ecosystem is empowered towards that order? So without wasting much time, I'm being told that Lul is not able to onboard, so we will proceed next. And this is what is very important. So ladies and gentlemen, pay attention to give us a deep dive into Ethiopia Diaspora Mapping Report. I'd like to welcome Omolayo, Kem, Ojo to break this down and help us understand to the details what Ethiopia portends for SME and startup financing. Over to you, Omolayo.
Good morning. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here, and thank you for the intro, Noah. I appreciate it. So very happy to be here. My name is Omolayo Nkem Ojo. I am a research manager at DMA Global, and we were very excited to work on this project with SIDA and Pangea. So thank you for having us on board. It was definitely an interesting project to work on over the past couple months. And so I'm just here to give a deep dive into some of the key findings from the report. So as mentioned, I'm a research manager at DMA Global. DMA is an international consulting firm based out of London, and we focus in on remittances, financial inclusion, payment systems, and diaspora affairs, including investments and engagement. So this project was very much so, one of interest to us. And so, as mentioned, I was a research manager on this project, but I also had a lot of support from my team members, especially Francine Dove, who's on this call with us as well. So yeah, without further ado, we'll just jump right in. I don't know if someone's sharing my presentation for me. We can get that started. Thank you so much. All right, so I'm already go on to the next slide, please. Second slide, please. Great. So just to give a quick overview of what we'll be talking about today. So I'm just going to be giving us highlights from the report. And so this presentation is structured after the report a bit. So the same chapters and findings from the report will be in today's presentation. So we'll go over some of the methodology that we use to complete this report. We'll have a brief conversation about Ethiopian diaspora remittance, diaspora numbers and remittance numbers as well. And of course, MSMEs in Ethiopia. We'll talk about some of the investment opportunities in Ethiopia, look a little bit at the Islamic financial landscape. We'll talk a bit about the barriers to investing in Ethiopia, particularly for the diaspora, of course. And then we'll deep dive into the survey that we completed. And then we'll talk about the recommendations. So just to quickly look at the methods, this research took three types of research methodologies. So of course, the first one was desk-based research, looking at the regulations and other reports that have been written about Ethiopian remittances and of course, the Ethiopian investment landscape. Then we also did primary research, which included talking to at least 15 stakeholders across government, donors, financial institutions such as banks, MFIs, diaspora organizations, and then investment and diaspora experts. We also completed an online survey that we shared across the diaspora, particularly in the USA, Canada, UK, and Europe. And then we struggled at first to get responses because I think people just have a lot of survey fatigue right now, especially during COVID. Surveys were kind of the only way to do research. So I think people feel a bit survey fatigued, but we were still able to get 96 quality respondents to our survey. So that gave us quite a few, some really great insights and showed us some really interesting patterns that I'll go over later in this presentation. And yeah, so that was the online surveys. And so just to kind of give a little bit of context for when we were going over this project. So a few other things kind of made it hard. So in addition to survey fatigue, we did this research around October, November. And so as we know, there was a conflict that broke out in Ethiopia. It's still ongoing. And so it made it really difficult to reach out to stakeholders who were, of course, busy or otherwise engaged, so definitely understandable. So it did take a while. So a project that we thought would take us about a month to complete ended up taking us 2.5 months to get done, just because it was really hard to reach people. And then of course, when we were speaking to diaspora members, a lot of them were quick to point out that, why are you asking me about investing when there's a war going on? So a very valid question. And so that was just something that made it a bit difficult to finish the project in a short time. But I think regardless, we still got a lot of really interesting insights that I think once the economy calms down and once the conflict is resolved, these all the insights that we received can be carried out full force. I just know that right now, a lot of diaspora members feel reluctant to invest when they know a conflict is going on. But after the conflict, I think these insights will still be very useful. Next slide, please. Okay, so just a quick overview of some of our remittance numbers. Generally, we know that there's about 871,000 Ethiopians in the diaspora, but this is a UNDESA number, which usually covers more documented migrants. So the number of undocumented migrants and then second and third generation diaspora members would be far larger than this, but this is like the official number that people are working with based on documented migrants. And so a lot of them live across the US, Saudi Arabia, Israel, Sudan, Canada, and Kenya. Those are the top destinations for Ethiopians who migrate out of Ethiopia. However, the top destinations for those sending money to Ethiopia is actually, so like the top countries sending money to Ethiopia is actually USA, UAE, Djibouti, Saudi Arabia, and the UK. So that means that even though there's a lot of Ethiopians in specific countries, the ones who send the most money come from slightly different countries. And so this probably just more so reflects the socioeconomic standing of the migrants who go to those particular countries, but it also reflects which countries send formally, because some of the numbers that I'm quoting are formal remittances, whereas a lot of remittances go through the parallel market, which isn't really, it's really hard to record that. So we don't have a clear picture of the full amount of remittances going into Ethiopia. But what we do know from the National Bank of Ethiopia is that in 2020, $2.5 billion was sent back to Ethiopia by Ethiopian migrants through formal channels. And so these would be MTOs or SWIFT transfers, so bank transfers and things of that nature. Yeah, and so still on this slide, I will talk a little bit about MSMEs. I think Anne covered a lot of their struggles earlier. So part of this project is understanding that, yes, Ethiopians in the diaspora sent home 2.5 billion and probably somewhere around that number each year. So they spent 2.5 billion in 2020 and spend around that same number each year. But where does it go to? And so we'll cover that in the survey findings. So we do have a little bit of insight on where that money goes to. And so we know that some of it does go to supporting the businesses of family and friends. And then when the Ethiopian Jobs Creation Commission spoke to us, somebody from that commission spoke to us, we asked them around MSME funding, and they said that about 4.5% of MSMEs, or 4.5% of the funding that MSMEs get is from family and friends, but we don't know what percentage of that is from diaspora family and friends. So there are some parts of this puzzle that we know, but some other parts, it's hard to like really put it together unless you go and talk to every single MSME and understand like, okay, so I understand you get your money from family and friends, but do they live abroad? Do they not live abroad? And those kinds of questions. And so one of the key parts of this project was thinking about, okay, so yes, diaspora members send home this large amount of remittances, but how much of it is going to MSMEs, and can it be further channeled into MSMEs? And so one of the things that I'm gonna try and explain throughout this project is that we can't actually connect the line that easily. It's the fact that a lot of remittances go also towards upkeep, taking care of family, taking care of education, medical bills. And so we can't just say, oh, let's rechannel that towards MSMEs, because some people just don't have that luxury. They have their families to take care of. And so what we need to do instead is explore other forms of diaspora financing that isn't exactly remittances. The diaspora are interested in investing in Ethiopia, but not necessarily from the same pool that they use to pay for their mother's medical bills and things like that. So that's one of the key points that I want to drive home today. So let's go to the next slide, please. Next slide. Thank you so much. Okay, so I won't deep dive into this slide too much because I believe Anne really covered a lot of the key points here. So I'll just pull out a few points from this slide, which is about some of the difficulties that MSMEs face in accessing finance in Ethiopia. Like Anne so well pointed out, is that a huge part of the Ethiopian economy is MSMEs, but there is a financing gap for them. A lot of banks find them to be riskier, and so it's really hard for them to access traditional financing routes such as loans or loans and things of that nature. And so it's really important to try and understand what other types of access to financing that they can get. Other issues is that there's a lot of cumbersome KYC processes from the banks when they do try to access loans. Sometimes they have to put up 240% of for collateral. So like, if they're trying to get $100 in loan, they'll have to give collateral that's worth $240 instead. And then there's a lot of times the Ethiopian identity checks are like, from what we understand, there is no national ID system. So a lot of banks have to do their own KYC processing, and KYC is know your customer, because before a bank will give you a loan, they need to know who you are, how much money you have, and what your risk profile is. And so to do that, banks have to carry out that process themselves, and it makes it even harder to give it to MSMEs and know who's behind these businesses. And then another thing that makes it hard for MSMEs is unclear government regulations, inflation, and other parts of the macro economy that just make it hard to survive as a business owner in the economy. And then one more thing I'll note on this slide is that there are several donor organizations and government agencies that are involved in supporting MSMEs with things such as grants and training programs and things of that nature, but there's not too much going on as far as investment. We did highlight a few in the report, so they do exist, but it's more so, you'll more so see grants being given to MSMEs than investments. So I'm excited about this project because of that idea of looking at investments for MSMEs. Next slide, please. All right, so just to go over some of the investment opportunities in Ethiopia, I wanted to quickly highlight some of the popular methods of finance mobilization in the diaspora. So as we've already seen, the diaspora already send lots of remittances home. So that's clearly one part of their financial contributions to Ethiopia, but there's other ways that they give back to the country as well. So one way is there's an Ethiopian Diaspora Trust Fund that was launched a few years back. So this one is strictly a donation. So people give the money, and then the EDTF puts it towards charitable projects like building a school and things of that nature. Another one is the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. And so this is a bond being sold by the government. And so you have to be Ethiopian to buy that bond. You don't have to be a diaspora member, but you do have to be Ethiopian to buy that bond. And so that's another way that the diaspora contributes. They are also buying shares in banks or MFIs. And so that's a portfolio investment. A growing number of diaspora members own businesses in Ethiopia, run it from abroad, or have a friend or family member run it for them. And so this is considered an investment. A lot of people are buying or building houses back in Ethiopia. So again, this is another investment. There's a lot of donation platforms, especially during COVID. There were a few that were, running to help people pay for medical bills and things of that nature. So the diaspora give back in that way. And then also the diaspora give back by paying for people's education. This is also kind of considered a form of investment because you are investing in the next generation of Ethiopian leaders. So whenever people talk about investment, it could encompass things beyond just the traditional definition of investing. And a lot of times when we spoke to Ethiopians in the diaspora about, oh, do you invest? It would usually be like, oh, yes, I have real estate. I'm trying to build a house, or yes, I have a business, or yes, I'm supporting my mom's business. It was hardly ever like, oh yeah, I'm donating to this organization, or oh, sorry, I'm investing in this business that I don't know. So that type of investing, like buying shares in a company, besides buying shares in a bank and MFIs, that buying shares in other companies and startups and MSMEs is not really that common yet. Yeah, I think that's those are some of the key points. I think another key point from this slide is that there are a lot of Ethiopian organizations who are interested in the diaspora's money. And so the more banks offer mortgages at what they would call incentivized rates for the diaspora. And then they also support the diaspora in setting up businesses, and the Ethiopian Investment Commission also supports the diaspora who are interested in opening up businesses and things of that nature. And then I think another thing to note for Ethiopia compared to other large economies in Africa, such as Nigeria and Kenya, is that Ethiopia doesn't have a stock market. So this is another reason why it's hard to access investing in Ethiopia, because there's no stock market where there's just a bunch of businesses listed, the way we find in Kenya and Nigeria who do have stock markets. Next slide, please. All right, so I will just touch on this briefly because Rama will be deep diving into the Islamic financial landscape. And so I just want to say that Islamic finance in Ethiopia is only just recently growing. There's 34%, Ethiopia is 34% Muslim, and so definitely a large percentage of the population is Muslim and interested in Islamic finance. But there was no formalized way of accessing Islamic finance until June 2019, when National Bank of Ethiopia made regulations around Islamic finance. And so that was when we started seeing Islamic finance products in the market. And so now we have 4 full-fledged banks or MFIs that offer Islamic finance products. And so those are listed there on the screen. But a lot of commercial banks in Ethiopia have an Islamic finance window where they also sell products, but these are the only 4 where all their financial products are Islamic. Next slide, please. All right, so as I've already kind of started mentioning, there's a few barriers to investing for not just Ethiopians in the diaspora, but just even people within Ethiopia who are trying to invest, and then anyone else, even outside of Ethiopia, who's trying to invest. And so, as mentioned, there are strict currency controls that contribute to an attractive parallel market. So one thing about Ethiopia is that they have a huge parallel market where there's one exchange rate that's set by the National Bank of Ethiopia, and then there's another exchange rate that's set by the parallel market. And so they're able to offer dollar prices at much better exchange rates than the banks can. So a lot of people actually send their remittances through the parallel market because they'll get more money for their transfers. And so the parallel market actually like really discourages people, well, yeah, it's discouraging to send money through the formal channels, and it just contributes to other issues. And so even as an investor, you're like, oh, should I invest through a formal channel where my money will only be worth this much, or should I just invest through the parallel channel where my money could be worth almost double sometimes, depending on the fluctuations in the market? There are also a lot of import and export controls in Ethiopia. A lot of these are in place to protect the Ethiopian economy so that people aren't importing things that they could just get locally in Ethiopia. But that said, there are other barriers that make it hard if you are an import exporter, if you're a kind of person who like exports livestock. It makes it hard with the controls to do your business. And then there's also a lot of difficulty when it comes to getting your cash out as an investor. So some of those strict currency controls means it's really hard to take money out of Ethiopia, whether that's birr, whether that's dollars. You have to, first of all, there's limits on how much you can take out and how often and for what purposes. And then if you're an investor, you have to make sure you're registered as an investor. You have to fill out a lot of paperwork to get your dividends or earn your interest and things of that nature. And then to then send it out, you have to also have like specific reasons, and there are limits on it. So it just makes it's not that easy, like, oh, okay, I'm investing and then next year I'll take out my dividends. Like it's not as fast and as straightforward as that. And then finally, another thing is that dual citizenship is not permitted in Ethiopia the way it is in other countries. And so the way around this is that there is an Ethiopian origin yellow card where you have to say, prove that you are of Ethiopian origin. Once you have that yellow card, you can then access all the perks and incentives of being a diaspora member, because diaspora members get to invest at the same tax rates as people who live in Ethiopia, whereas if you're a totally foreign investor, your tax rates are completely different. So, but in order for the diaspora member to access those incentivized rates, you have to get a yellow card, and you can't have dual citizenship. So that's also another barrier. Thank you. For the next slide. So now we're into the survey. So this was another meaty part of the report. So I'll just go over it very quickly just so we can get right into the key findings and the recommendations. So as mentioned, 96 people took the survey, completed the survey, but not everyone got to the end. And at the end was the demographic questions. But of the people who got to the end, most of them were 26 to 35. And so that's pretty in line with the types of people who take online surveys. We don't really see too many people from like much older generations taking online surveys. So it does not mean that they don't invest. It just means that they don't take online surveys. We saw most of them were male. And so this kind of fits into the narrative that, men invest more often, that some research has found, but it's not actually that men invest more often. It's just more so that they're more willing to talk about it, more willing to share about it, and according to other research. Yeah, I think that's good for this side. And then also the people who got to the end, a lot of them made between 50,000 to 75,000 a year. So of course, the more money you have, the more able you are to invest. So I feel like the demographic of the people who took the survey matched what previous research finds are the types of people in a better position or who are more likely to talk about investing. Next slide, please. All right, so in the first part of the survey, we looked at people's remittance practices just to kind of understand, what money they were already sending home and for what purposes. And so most respondents sent money home to their parents. So 27% sent money home to their parents, followed by their siblings, and then followed by friends. The primary use of remittances in Ethiopia is for food, with almost 21% of respondents saying that that's what they sent their money home for. But then other key ones were household bills and utilities, medical bills was another big one, and education was also another big one. So those were the four biggest things that people spend their remittances on. A few did say that they spent it on, building a house or investing in the businesses of family and friends, but education, food, healthcare, and household bills was the top 4 reasons for sending remittances. And so that's kind of why I'm trying to say that we can't just say, okay, stop paying for food for your family and send this to MSMEs. So we need to be careful how we phrase our language around remittances for investment, because a lot of that is earmarked for family and for good purpose. Okay, next slide. All right, so some of the attitudes towards investing include that, so we ask people, first of all, like, all right, are you interested in investing? Yes or no? Do you already invest? And so quite a few people did say that they were very interested in investing, and about 30% of people said that they were already investing. So that's definitely a good sign. As mentioned, Ethiopians are interested in investing back in the country. It's just a matter of in what and how and through what means. And quite a few people, quite a few, are you telling me to wrap up? Just let me know how many minutes I have left.
Yes, so I've inboxed you, hopefully in the next 10 minutes, if it is possible.
Oh yeah, more, yeah. I don't need 10 minutes. Thank
All right.
you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right, yeah, so, but the point is, back on the attitudes towards investing, a lot of people are open to investing, are interested in investing, and in particular are interested in investing in MSMEs, and quite a few were already investing in MSMEs. So that was a pretty promising development. We can skip right towards the patterns of investing and importance of trust slide, just because I'm not sure what slide you are on. I believe it should be slide 9 or so, or 11 or 12. Try it, one of those, please. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, investing for diaspora, for Ethiopians in the diaspora falls under 3 categories. It's usually money towards family and friends businesses. It usually means investing in real estate, and it usually means starting your own business. So this idea of investing in a stranger's business is something that Pangea and anyone else interested in tapping into diaspora investing, there's a mindset shift that's needed. Just because, like, I just want to read a quote for you guys that one of the stakeholders we spoke to said. He explained that once their immediate family is okay, so like once you've sent remittances to your family and you feel like, okay, my family can stand on my own, like sometimes you'll send to your family and then eventually you'll send to your family to like start up a business of their own. And then with that business, you won't have to send them remittances that often. So now it's like, okay, what do you do with the remittances that you were sending your family? So then once their family is okay, then the diaspora feel that they can start thinking about the extended family. So, you know, cousins, uncles, aunts, and then once the extended family is taken care of, which is very hard because a lot of Ethiopians come from very large families. Once that larger family is okay, then you start thinking, okay, what about my cousin's friend? What about my neighbors? What about that childhood friend from elementary school? So there's a lot of other people, and you almost feel guilty giving your money to a stranger when you know, like, oh, that one girl that I went to high school with, she's starting a hair business. Why don't I just support her instead? So getting people from, I need to take care of my community, I need to take care of my family, to I need to take care of this business owner's expense that I don't know. There's a mindset shift needed. So that just means a lot of education around investing and the importance of broader investing beyond our immediate networks. Yep, another thing that's really important is that there's a lot of issues with trust. And so some of the reasons why people invest in their family's business and their friend's business is that you can know them, you can go check up on them, you know exactly what street they're on, and you trust that they will do the best with the money that you can, as opposed to giving it to a stranger or a third-party platform. And so some of those issues with trust also extend to, the relationship between the diaspora and the government isn't always the best. And then there's also a lot of mistrust from the diaspora towards international communities, like international organizations. So some of these things keep people from investing past their platforms, past their networks. But there are opportunities for this to change. We already see some people like the Ethiopian Angel Investors Network, and Mdpa, who is working on an entrepreneurship fund, and also who put on events between the investors and small businesses and startups. We see this changing. Like, there is an interest in the more traditional definition of investing, and buying shares and giving capital. That is growing. It's just going to take a while, and further education, further conversation. Next slide, please. All right, so, and then another thing from the survey that we found is that, there's certain sectors that people are more interested in than others. So the technology sector, agricultural sector, and the tech sector were sectors that people were really interested in. So MSMEs that are in this sector would definitely be of interest to members of the diaspora, at least who took the survey. People are also really interested in being, I think you're supposed to be on slide 12 or 13, please. And so investors Ethiopians in the diaspora are also interested in socially conscious investments. And I think Rama can probably speak to this a bit more when she talks about Islamic finance, but people aren't just interested in like, okay, let me invest and see how much money I can make back. Ethiopians in the diaspora are very interested in what impact is my investment making? Is this good for the environment? Is this creating jobs in Ethiopia? So picking out MSMEs that have really great causes, really great ethics, really great transparency is very important for the diaspora when picking who to invest in. And as Anne already mentioned, women in particular are interested in women-started businesses, so that's pretty good. And then 42% of men are still interested in women-started businesses, so also pretty great. Next slide, please. I think this is still the same slide. Can I get the next slide, please? Great, thank you. Okay, so we had about 9 recommendations come out of this project. So I will just briefly go through them. With each recommendation, we had a headline of like the main goal, objective of that recommendation, but then we also had some activities that could be carried out to achieve that objective. And then also we have some stakeholders who could participate to make that happen. And then we also put the difficulty, priority level, and what category it was in. So in marketing, we talked about integrating customer segmentation into all aspects of product development and market processes. The Ethiopian diaspora is very unique, very vast, very varied, very diverse. So you can't just be like, okay, this is the Ethiopian diaspora and this is how we're going to reach them. No, there are 3rd-generation diaspora, there are refugees, there are business people, there are students. So we need to do customer segmentation and like different strategies for different markets. There are people who just moved out of Ethiopia and are not ready to invest because their primary purpose is to remit back to their family. So trying to get people like that to invest is a lost cause. So, but there are more established Ethiopian business owners who have more fluid funds who would be ready and are already investing. So just thinking through those strategies and those segments of the population. 2, ensuring that investment products appeal to the diaspora's interest in creating impact and develop marketing strategies to promote and discuss the development impact possible through investment. So as I mentioned, it's not just about, oh, how much money can this make me? It's about what impact does this make? So we have to be thinking about that as we pull MSMEs together and as we market the impact of the MSMEs. On the regulation side, there is some work to be done. As I said, the Ethiopian market isn't the easiest to invest in, even if you are ready and informed. If we could stay on the recommendation slide, please. So the next recommendation was provide advocacy and support around improving Ethiopia's regulatory environment to improve ease of investing. So there's just a lot of work that just needs to be done at the regulatory level and in collaboration with the government to improve this. And then develop and properly communicate appropriate measures for paying diaspora investors their dividends. So if we're going to get people to invest, they need to understand the whole process, and we need to make certain parts of the regulation clearer to them so that they don't just think like, oh, I'll invest today and be able to get the money tomorrow. So some education around that. Next slide, please. Okay, great. So stay on the slide, please. No. I didn't realize you had already moved. All right, so the next one is to promote a transparent business strategy and highlight the people behind the platform to ensure its trustworthiness. So trust is paramount for people when they're investing, especially on third-party platforms. So that's really key. And then ensure the Sharia compliance of Islamic investment products and engage those already in the space to develop partnerships and synergies. So in Islamic financing is still quite new in Ethiopia. And so it's important to tap into the networks that are already working on it instead of trying to create totally new standards, like tap into the standards that are already in place and work with them to ensure that it's in compliance with what's culturally accepted there. Recommendation 7 is around utilizing suitable accelerators and incubators and other business development initiatives to ensure that the success of businesses featured on the investment platform. MSMEs don't just need access to finance, they also need support, they need training, they need all those things. And then that actually also helps build trust with investors when they know that, okay, I'm giving my money, but this platform is also giving training. And so between my money and the training, this is more likely to be a success. So that's a really great way to put those things together. Recommendation 8 is to develop a range of educational tools and resources for the different types of investors to ensure the platform offers more than just investment products, but also builds investor confidence. So again, this is just around educating the diaspora on how to invest. Like I mentioned, this is still pretty new, this idea of investing in third-party businesses through other platforms that you don't know personally. So there's a lot of education that needs to be done. And finally, this recommendation around reorienting our language around channeling remittances for investments. And instead, we need to promote using your savings, using your extra funds towards investments, and not trying to ask people to use the remittances that they're spending for their family and ask them to use it instead for investments. No, it's like, in addition to your remittances, do you have savings? Do you have all these other types of financing that you can then put towards investment? So that's the language and behavior that we want to be going for. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much. Omolayo Ojo. I mean, that's a beautiful name. I'm tempted to use that name on my firstborn daughter. I'm not even dating right now, so that's a discussion for another day. Let's not get personal, but I'm really glad that you've had a deep dive into the report. Now we understand where we are operating from, what is the status quo, and I'm glad that we have recommendations touching on marketing, regulation, the issue of trust, and also literacy. And I'm glad the issue of language you mentioned, that we need to look, our approach needs to be a little bit different in terms of how we talk to people. The normal jargon of, your remittances directed into the startups and the SMEs. No, you tell them, your extra, the excess that you have, can you channel it into this particular platform? That is quite interesting. And I'm seeing a lot of questions, a lot of curiosity, a lot of people are asking for the report. We will mail you. I know you're sharing your mails right there with us, and I believe that it will be good. And I'm excited for the next presentation, which will be coming up later on. Of course, we'll be delving into the Islamic finance by Rahma. But before we do that, earlier on, we were trying to get Lul Wundermeher, who is the program manager, SIDA, the embassy of Sweden in Ethiopia. And finally, we've been able to get hold of him. Lul, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Noah. Just checking if you can hear me.
100% clear.
Excellent. Apologies for the earlier technical glitch. It seemed like I was in another room, so apologies for that, everyone, panelists, participants. But otherwise, I just wanted to, I wish I could come before the presentation, because the presentation, had given us the deep dive. So now it won't make sense, for SIDA to say this and that. But regardless, I'll try to be brief and very generic. But otherwise, as my colleague Sophie has said, I just wanted to touch base in terms of what SIDA's role, in supporting SMEs, and perhaps also, the connections with regards to this study, as well as uh, our collaboration with SIDA HQ from embassy in here Addis for this project. Let me talk a little bit about our strategy, which is which the current strategy that we're implementing now, which was supposed to be from 2015 to 2020, but due to various reasons, it was postponed now until 2022. Just for the participants' sake, that we have submitted draft strategy, a 5-year draft strategy for Swedish Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and we're currently awaiting a decision. But otherwise, in the current strategy that we're implementing, it has 3 goals, and one of the goals is working on economic development and sustainable livelihoods, where we perhaps see a connection, with regards to diaspora investment, as our works merits, supporting jobs creation works, supporting MSMEs, as Anne was, speaking earlier on in her presentation, perhaps also startups, looking at access to finance, including innovating financing tools, such as guarantees, challenging funds. But we also work, in enabling environment, which actually, is our major works, together with multilaterals, international NGOs, and local business membership organizations. For example, I see similar names that has somehow been supported by the embassy for this enabling environment and jobs creation cooperation, participating in this validation workshop, which I'm happy to see. And the new 5-year strategy will also, in addition to continuing what I just said now, in terms of supporting SMEs and startups, it will also have a new result area, and in terms of inclusive and peaceful societies, where we would see how we will adapt to the current context, but perhaps also support inclusive economic development efforts. And I'm happy a little bit of this are being discussed in the presentations. Also, Sophie has touched upon some of it, but we're going to also see or perhaps have an angle of digitalization and support startups as an angle in the new strategy as well. So like I suggested when I began, we are currently awaiting a government decision from Sweden for the new 5-year strategy. But immediately after that, it will be the operationalization stage that we will embark on, where we would actually use such kind of studies in terms of finding innovative solutions to the development challenge here in the country. We also have what we call an Mdpa analysis, which is a multi-dimensional poverty analysis, and it has 4 components. And in one of the findings under the resource component, is the lack of finance for underserved segment, to become themselves in finding sustainable livelihood solutions, where we're also trying to find synergies. I mentioned earlier on, innovating financial tools, such as guarantees, challenge funds. That's also something we're looking at in the quest, to support MSMEs, as we call them at the embassy, in terms of creating sustainable jobs. So it's just to say to the participants that all this will feed into our thinking during our incoming and oncoming operationalization, and in our continued development efforts for our inclusive economic pillar in our current strategy, as well as which we'll take on in the coming new new 5-year strategy. I'll stop here, no, and give the mic back to you, and happy to respond if there are any questions. And apologies again for the technical glitch that I had earlier on. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Louis. You said you are in the wrong room, so I hope you stick right there at the right room. Yeah, and when the questions come, I'm looking at the Q&A segment. One of the questions was, would you please explain what is SIDA's role towards the Ethiopian diaspora investment, what their contribution and what their benefits as a government agency involving in this particular project? And I know there's a hand raised. We're going to come to the Q&A session, but before that, I'd like us to still dissect this particular report, especially from the Islamic finance perspective. And without wasting much time, I'd like to welcome Rahma Hersi, who is an Islamic finance lawyer and advocate, economic justice in Africa. She has over a decade plus experience in economic justice and gender advisory and Islam finance, working across Africa, Middle East, and Europe. And I'm glad that she's able to give us her, of course, well-earned outlook and analysis of this particular report. So the floor is yours, Rahma.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. And I would like to start off by greeting you all with the greetings of peace that you are most familiar with in Arabic, which is Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It is great pleasure for me to be part of this conversation because I truly believe now is the time for offering solutions and hope in the world that we're living in today. And if I can contribute even a small part to that, it gives me great pleasure. Perhaps I could now have the presentation put up by the team. Excellent. Let's go to the next slide. Let's start the conversation from the very beginning, because Islamic finance is not an industry that is well understood, and particularly with the country in reference, Ethiopia, it is more than a niche market. And so what is it? Islamic finance is an industry that is consistent with faith-based principles. And these faith-based principles are equity and justice. The underlying principles, as I've shared, it is a system consistent with Islamic law, meaning it is faith-based. And secondly, it is based on underlying principles of the Islamic economy is equity, justice, and fairness. So more often than not, whereas profit is encouraged and opportunity is also encouraged, the principles will always direct the adherence to what is fair and what is equitable. It is also seen globally as an alternative source of resource mobilization. And I will share later on as we go into the presentation how other faiths, other communities, other interested stakeholders and parties have tapped into Islamic finance to raise resources to address our collective human issues or challenges. Next. But what makes it so different? And I can tell you, after working for a decade plus in the industry, everybody I ask this question comes to me and say, we know it prohibits interest. Well, let's look at the other distinguishing features. Islamic finance distinguishes itself in that it must be asset-backed, meaning that it must be based on something. It must be tied to a real economy. It cannot be buying and selling things that you don't own, at least don't own or have no rights over. So that's the first distinguishing feature. The second is the one that is most known, and that is the prohibition of interest. And the reason for this is because Islamic finance comes from the position that money is only a medium of exchange and it's just a medium of exchange and is not a commodity in of itself. And that is why Islamic finance bans interest. Third, Islamic finance has another distinguishing feature, which is it restricts investments. What does that mean? Whereas we all know in other financial systems, in so long as you are a functioning, you are a legal of sound mind adult, have the capacity, and it is not against the law, you can invest in whatever you want. Islamic finance comes to say, no, we will restrict your investments if it is seen to be a problem to the greater community. Because whereas you have a right to profit and benefit as an individual, it can never be at the cost of the greater part of society. And this is not only within Islamic finance, but generally within the principles of Islamic law. And this allows me to segue into the next, sorry, can we go back to the next slide still? Into the next, no, let's go back to the one I'm still talking, kindly. The distinguishing features, I'm not done with that slide. Thank you. Segueing into the next distinguishing feature, whereas we've said Islamic finance restricts investments, here I give you examples of what kind of potential investments could that be. Islamic finance does not allow us to invest in anything that comes with extreme uncertainty and is seen to be of a gambling nature. So anything to do with casinos, anything to do with speculation, anything to do with the investment markets that push for hedging derivatives to a certain extent, that really push the boundary on extreme uncertainty and great speculation, Islamic finance puts a prohibition on that. Because remember, the principle is always that takes us back, that is underlying within the entire economic system is justice, fairness, and equity. And then Islamic finance has another distinguishing feature, which is of risk and reward sharing. So inbuilt within the contracts or within the products that are offered, there's always a mechanism of risk and reward sharing because it goes back to what does the underlying principle state? That there must be fairness and justice in how the transaction is carried out. Next slide, please. And I think I touched on the prohibited activities, but I will go into further examples here. So Islamic finance or the Islamic economy will not touch pork or pork-related businesses. So whereas you can be a farmer, the Islamic bank will not finance you if you are a farmer who keeps pigs, for example. And then tobacco, arms and ammunition, cinemas, and here I will say once again, not all cinemas, but cinemas that might be playing adult movies, things that are considered to be immoral within the Islamic faith. Interest-based financial services, gambling, liquor, and pornography. Now, just to pause here for a moment, Islamic scholars recognizing that we needed to bring the Islamic financial principles to exist within our modern world and within the modern environment that we live in, they put in certain very restrictive conditions in line with the environment that we live in. So for example, they said, look, we recognize that we must promote investments, we must promote businesses, and whereas there are clear-cut instructions that we cannot invest in certain businesses, but how do we navigate within Islamic law certain allowances? So there's a very famous legal opinion that was given in the late 90s, early 2000s. It's called the Dow Jones Fatwa, which is the Islamic legal opinion, which states that in so long as your business, whatever you are making from your business, the immoral part, or what is considered prohibited part, is less than 5% of your current business, then it will be this immoral or prohibited business will be allowed, because that's not your core business, and your core business is actually permitted. So what do we mean? For example, if I want to invest in Emirates Airlines, for example, let me give a very extreme example in that regard. Emirates Airlines, its core business it's in the travel business. But within Emirates, there is instance where alcohol is served within the business, right? But when you look at their books, what brings them the profit is not in the sale of the alcohol that is served in the plane or in the flights or whatever, but it is in the travel business. So this is sort of how Muslim scholars dealt with these issues of looking at the greater purpose of Islamic law and the environment that we live in. So that was just a quick explanation for all of us. Let's move on to the next slide. Yes. But why is there an interest in Islamic finance? And I'm giving this introductory understanding before we get into the report, because Islamic finance has positioned itself, whereas it's positioned itself as a faith-based industry, it also offers a value proposition to the world. So for example, if you look at it from a global position, it is a $2.1 trillion industry. It has presence in over 75 countries around the world, and these countries are not all Muslim majority countries. Kenya, my country that I come from, is not a Muslim majority country, but has had Islamic finance in existence for a better part of a decade. And this has been led because of market interest, right? We have countries such as the United Kingdom that had Islamic finance grow quite strongly, to the point that even legislation, there's been amendments within legislation to allow for the growth of Islamic finance. In fact, the first Islamic bond that was listed on the London Stock Exchange was done in 2013 to help with the healthcare sector within the country. So Germany is another example where and the first Islamic bond in Europe coming out of the region was done in Germany. And this was way back in 2004. Again, growing interest within the Islamic finance space. And so, just as a global overview, there's also a growth rate of about 20%. And we also have over 450 financial institutions. Again, these financial institutions are not only fully fledged Islamic financial institutions, but they are both Islamic financial institutions as well as conventional institutions that recognized that they needed to have a window to cater for their clients that were interested in this offering. So banks such as Barclays Bank, which opened in Kenya the first Islamic window back in 2005, is one such example. I mean, now it's obviously ABSA. And then you have banks such as HSBC, Citi, and these are the big investment and commercial banks globally. And then within the Ethiopian context, we have seen what my colleague has shared. We have, conventional institutions that have been offering Islamic finance, such as the Commercial Bank of Ethiopia, Oromia, that before the legislation was passed, were offering to us in a very restricted form. But once legislation has now passed in 2019, there's a bit more openness in that regard. And then you also have a range of products ranging from simple to structured wholesale, and then social impact-driven products as well. And one such example, especially for social impact driven, we had back in 2019 a collaboration between the Islamic Development Bank, the International Federation of the Red Cross, that was coming up with what was considered a blended financial instrument to support water, hygiene and sanitation, WASH, and also to combat cholera. Because there was a realization that whereas finances are there, they're also very limited, and we need to pull resources from other alternative sources to be able to address our global needs. And so this One Wash Sukuk, or One Wash Islamic bond, was seen to be one such socially impact-driven product, right? And I can always share further details on that in the question and answer or in the chat. Can we go to the next slide? Next slide, please. The question then also says, why has the industry grown so fast? Well, back before oil prices are what they are today, there was a great increase in revenues from the Gulf states, and they were looking for places to invest their profits or their finances, right? And so they were looking at markets such as the UK, Luxembourg, Ireland, and places where they would also get favorable tax incentives. And this was one way that the Islamic finance industry grew. And then, of course, there's the Muslim population growth, currently standing globally at 1.7 billion. And we can see even within the Ethiopian context, it's almost 34% of the population. And then we also see that there were regulatory reforms. I've already touched on what's happening in the UK and in Germany, France, that has passed real estate tax regulations to allow for Islamic finance to exist within the country, especially in the real estate aspect. Countries such as mine, Kenya, that has passed regulatory reforms to allow for Islamic finance growth, especially in the area of double taxation in this regard. And this has encouraged Islamic finance to grow globally, right? Both in Muslim majority countries as well as in conventional Muslim minority countries. And then there's been government support. And here you find countries, again, in Europe, and here I'd like to give the example of Japan, which realized that Muslims have high purchasing power and want to spend, in vacations or in tourism and things like that. So what Japan did is they created an enabling environment to allow for those who are of the Muslim faith or have certain preferences within this space to be able to travel to Japan and feel comfortable and at home. So for example, very small things. At the airport, they created a prayer place, created food that was in line with Muslim principles. So, places that didn't have served alcohol, didn't serve pork, created, places where people could swim and be entertained in a way that was in line with their ethics and their values. And this is how Japan was able to build its, really tap into its tourism industry and grow its tourism industry in a remarkable way. Obviously, with COVID, a lot of things have changed, but governments realizing that it's not only from a financial perspective, but within the Islamic economy in totality. right? And then we have acceptance by conventional institutions. Here we have support and collaboration with institutions such as the World Bank that have set up working groups, and have also within the World Bank worked together with Muslim countries to have had the first Islamic bond to support vaccination. You have IFC that is working very closely to develop Islamic finance in different capacities. And then the Islamic financial institutions that I've given, HSBC, Citibank, Barclays Bank, some of the really big banks globally that have worked to accept Islamic finance and build windows. Within the Ethiopian context, we also see that, and now that there's legislation that's been passed, there's a growing industry, not just from a fully fledged space, but also conventional institutions that are looking to tap into the industry. So either by offering products or looking at having an entire window. And then there's been the diversification of efforts. And here, it's not just within finance, but it's finance as well as in offering products within tourism, within food, within modest wear, and realizing that there is so much more opportunity and so much more interest, and how to tap into that. And then we have roles enabling institutions that are standard setting boards. So we have within the Gulf, we have the IOFI institution, which supports Islamic financial institutions with accounting and Sharia standards. And then we have institutions in Malaysia, such as the Islamic Financial Services Board, that supports with governance as well as Sharia standards. And these, again, work towards building some level of standardization, because there's always a question of how do we standardize the industry? How do we bring some sort of conformity? There looks to be a lot of confusion. And Ethiopia, as a new and growing country within this space, will definitely, if not already having these conversations will be coming up. And then there's an increasing propensity for Sharia compliant finance, as I have shared above. Can we go to the next slide? And looking at Islamic finance in Ethiopia, I would like to start the conversation by looking at Islam historically in Ethiopia, where there's a shared heritage with the faith dating back all the way to 1,400 years to the time of the Prophet, where Ethiopia took in refugees from the Muslim world who were fleeing persecution. So Islam is not a new thing within the country. Thus, Islamic finance as well should be something that is embraced and seen to be one within the greater population of there being Muslims there, but also within the shared history that Ethiopia has with the faith and the people. And further to that is the idea of there being a population interest within the industry. And here I'd also like to say there is a very clear sign in that the wording and the language of what the industry represents to different markets is important. So Ethiopia has taken the direction of calling it interest-free banking and not calling it Islamic finance, at least from an official perspective. And this is the prerogative of the country. Different countries have taken different positions. Kenya, for example, talked about Islamic finance right from the get-go and use that language in documentation, in presentations, and in the community. There has been both a positive and a negative reaction in this regard, because positive in the sense that it has allowed for a population that generally was underbanked to start feeling like they are included in the financial system. And so one of the things Islamic finance can do, even in Ethiopia, is allow for maybe those who are underbanked to feel that they are part of the system. But there's also been the negative perception where Islam, with the misconceptions that is out there in the media or in the public is then create sort of a negative barrier for the industry. And a lot of the work that I have been doing, and we've been doing, those of us in the space, is more often than not demystifying what Islamic finance and what it can offer. And so Ethiopia has taken that position of calling it interest-free banking. And this is, from the prerogative and a legislative perspective. Now, we do know that there was already Islamic finance activities happening in Ethiopia, even before the directive passed, on a case-to-case basis, because there are institutions such as the Central Commercial Bank of Ethiopia that were offering products, although very, very restricted spaces. Two of the Somali microfinance institutions that were established in Ethiopia that were fully fledged were operating out of Ethiopia even before the directive passed on a very special need base. And so Islamic finance has been growing, but now with the directive passed, I think there's greater opportunity and more support politically for what the industry is. And as shared, there's 2 fully fledged Islamic microfinance institutions. There's several windows, and there's 3 fully fledged banks in existence. And I think there's others that are looking to be licensed within the industry. And again, the offerings are, and the products are growing, and there's interest to understand how much more to build within the product offering. But one of the things that is obviously of concern is how to create awareness and how to create capacity within those who can understand what the industry has to offer, and utilizing local experts is important to help with the landscape, but also now that there are enabling institutions, maybe Ethiopia can also look at tapping into best practices in that regard. Can we look at the next slide? Can we go to the next slide, please? Thanks. And the reason for Islamic finance growth in Ethiopia is, well, one, there is a large and youthful population, and not only in Ethiopia, but a global observation for those of us working in the industry is a lot more younger people wanting to align with their values and align with their faith, is pushing for different industries to consider how to attract this younger demographic. And so Islamic finance is one such industry that is also not being left behind because of the push from the community and the market in that regard. And then obviously there's now regulatory support with a directive that was passed in 2019. And within the survey that was carried out in the report that was highlighted by my colleague, we have over 60% of those who are interested in Islamic finance saying that they would want, there's a growing interest and there is a preference for this. Now, more often than not, Islamic finance, you will find that people will not want to touch or invest in products that are not in line with their faith. And so Islamic finance has come not just to offer this alternative, but has come on board to also offer financial inclusion to the community so that everybody gets to be part of the system and build stronger economies, right? Another reason for IF growth in Ethiopia is the interest in digital platform for investment, because this brings about transparency. We've all heard the conversations of, oh yes, we send money back home, and yes, sometimes the money is not used for what it is. So platforms such as the one that Pangea, supported by SIDA, are looking at and are bringing on board, are creating real interest in how do we develop Islamic finance further in Ethiopia. And then there's a general opening up of Ethiopian markets, and that's been highlighted by my colleagues. And then there's a lot more information sharing between investors and interested parties. And something I always tell everybody is Islamic finance is very much an oral industry. People share information at such rapid speed that it either pushes the industry forward, or it can bring the industry or financial institution crashing down because of the trust that people have, and how quickly information moves. So one of the reasons we can see for the growth of IF in Ethiopia is definitely the information sharing between investors and interested parties. Next slide, please. But it goes without saying that there are challenges of Islamic finance growth in Ethiopia, particularly if you consider the long history that Ethiopia has had with the faith, and also the population that is currently in existence. And this is not only with Ethiopia, it is generally across the board with Islamic finance. And that is the lack of general knowledge on Islamic finance. I cannot tell you how often I have walked into a room, and it doesn't matter in the decade, that more than 10 years plus that I've been doing this, the conversation will always boil down to, is this for everybody? Or is this only for Muslims? And my answer is always, it is for everybody, but the Muslim financial institutions have a lot more work to be done. So an example I want to share here, that of a country that has been successful in really demystifying what Islamic finance is and has brought down the conversation to the masses level where everybody partakes of it, is Malaysia. Malaysia is predominantly a Muslim country and is seen to be a country that is well established in Islamic finance. And research shows, and our conversations with our colleagues in Malaysia states, that the people who tap into Islamic finance in Malaysia, the greatest numbers are actually the Chinese community for their different business endeavors. So it's not necessarily the Muslim community, it's those of other faiths and other backgrounds. And why do they do this? Because they have understood the value proposition within Islamic finance. And this is now a challenge that those of us in the continent and in the region working within the industry, Ethiopia is no exception, that general knowledge of Islamic finance must be disseminated in a manner that is very palatable and is engaging, so that people understand that there are value propositions and is not just for one faith. So that's one. The second I would say is regulation still needs to be more robust. Yes, there is now legislation, but there's a lot more work to be done, and to allow for the industry, because looking at other markets such as Kenya where the industry grew from a market perspective, and later on we brought legislation was brought to encourage and develop the industry further. We have seen that it is very, very critical to have robust legislation from the get-go, because this allows for the rapid growth of the industry, right? And then it goes without saying, tying this to the first point, lack of awareness due to misconceptions of Islam. It cannot be avoided, and Ethiopia is no exception, because even how Ethiopia terms Islamic finance here, it's taken the position of interest-free banking. So there is obviously some concerns about how Islamic finance should be positioned and should be communicated and should be addressed as capacities built at every level. And then, not particular to Islamic finance, but across the board in Ethiopia, is the tight controls on currency and the effects of business across the board. So all these are things that are an impediment to the growth of Islamic finance in Ethiopia and finance in general in Ethiopia. What are the opportunities highlighted in the report? Well, market opportunities and tech-enabled investment platforms. This goes without saying. Now that there's an understanding that there are Islamic financial institutions that are coming up and flourishing, and there could be potential for investment products through the investment platforms. There's a growing interest, as shared earlier. And then there's also a demand for investment products and a need for solutions. Now, within Islamic finance, there's an understanding that, yes, we do want to invest in the products, but it's not only commercially driven, right? We want to be able to impact our societies. And this is where Ethiopia and across the industry, Islamic social finance can be utilized, where people are supporting the community as well as supporting developing the industry within the country. So you have products such as the Islamic endowments, or what are called waqf, or examples like what are being used by NGOs, international organizations such as UNHCR, that has tapped into Islamic social finance, which is looking at the alms or the zakah that Muslims pay, or those who can afford to pay every year, and using this money, collecting, using digital and tech support to address the humanitarian crisis around the world. So Islamic social finance is being used to support humanitarian work globally. And so within the diaspora, Muslim diaspora, who want to tap into Islamic finance, they can be bonds and products that are developed that serve both a social cause as well as offer a profit or a benefit in that regard. And then obviously there's a growing need for Sharia compliant investments, because as I mentioned earlier, you have a younger youthful population that are very interested in business, and they want to be able to invest in line with their faith and their values. And then there's a growing need for Islamic finance and the Islamic economy in general. The recommendations continued is to understand that trust is key. It is absolutely fundamental in the industry and critical when developing investment products. Without establishing a system of trust, which means having in place Sharia scholars, having people who ensure that the products are compliant, would be key in developing the industry. Otherwise, we would be in trouble. And then I've mentioned a robust regulatory framework is needed to build confidence with investors, because nobody wants to work within a framework that does not secure my investment. And then it is critical to get the Islamic fund structure to be Sharia compliant and align with Sharia principles. This is what I'm talking about when I mentioned that it is very, very important to have buy-in from Sharia scholars, local scholars who understand finance and who also understand Islamic law, to be able to then have buy-in from the community. Otherwise, people will not touch the fund or will not touch the products that are developed unless there's buy-in, unless there is compliance at the very high level. And then, like everything else, investment awareness creation and developing capacity of all those interested in the industry. So creating awareness in the community is key. And I've talked about just the misconceptions that can hold back the industry and the challenges that brings, but also creating developing capacity at every level. So whether it is at the regulatory level, whether it is at the financial institution level, or whether it's within the community, because without that, then it would not be, it will be difficult, and so we highly recommend that awareness creation and demystification of what the industry is absolutely necessary, and I would actually say is the number one needed needed recommendation that needs to be implemented immediately. And I think with that, we are now at the end, and I thank you very much for listening to me. I'm sure there will be a lot of questions and comments, and I'm happy to share and engage further. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rahma Hersi, for your input right there on matters Islamic finance. And I think we can just chop this up from the start of the presentation to the end and post it as a masterclass in matters Islamic finance. You've really demystified a lot of misunderstanding when it comes to Islamic finance and the opportunities there in Ethiopia. Wow, that's awesome. Thank you very much. So time is really running. It's 20 minutes past 4. East African time. And I know time is of value. So if you say you will be here in 2 hours, after 2 hours, you should be out of here. I think that should be the case. So without wasting much time, I'm seeing lots of questions coming in. But I'd like us to jump straight into the panel discussion so that we address some key questions. Then later on, we supplement those questions with the other good questions that we've gotten from our wonderful listeners. So without wasting much time, I'd like us to go straight to our panel section. And this is, of course, some of the people featuring in the panel from people spoken here earlier on, Anne Lawi, MD Pangea Trust. We have Rahma, who's just finished an awesome presentation on Islamic finance. We have Sophie from SIDA HQ. We also have Omolayo Ojo, who actually delved into the report in detail earlier on. And we are also joined on the panel by Adis Alemaye, who's the chairman of Kazana Group, who is actually is an investor in over 13 companies, which has diverse portfolio. And I'm glad that we have somebody who's doing something in the investment space, where he'll give some real life examples of what the solutions are. Also on our panel, we have Amadou Dafe, who's the CEO and co-founder of Gebea Inc. And what they do, they are Pan-African freelance talent marketplace, and they're linking young people to what we call work, especially in this age of digital revolution. We also have Vera Obare, who is the regional program officer, SIDA. So without saying, that's our panel, just in brief. So to start off, I think Rama has spoken this in detail, but maybe in less than a minute, encapsulate this particular question, where how can Islam finance be incorporated in diaspora investing? Briefly, Rahman.
Sure. Thank you very much, Noah, for the opportunity. And I think it can be incorporated in several ways, right? So from a commercial perspective, we see that Islamic finance, financial institutions can offer products that across the range that diaspora can invest or tap into, and are tailored to suit their particular interest in whatever industry they want to. So that's one way from a financial institution. And then secondly, I think the education and creating awareness of how social finance tools such as Islamic endowment, and I see somebody has asked what is a waqf. What a waqf is an Islamic endowment, can also be a way that Islamic finance can be incorporated in the country, and this would serve several purposes. It would attract the investors who care for social impact and not just profit. And it would also be a way for the government and other corporations, whether it's at a government level or at a corporation level, to tap into alternative resources out there to support the either humanitarian needs of the country or also to support the social needs of the country. So at a commercial level, but also at an Islamic social finance level could be another way. And then through the beneficial loans, which is also another Islamic financial social finance product, where good loans are given, and these are I veer away from using Arabic terminology with the understanding that not everybody understands Arabic, and Islamic finance is couched in Arabic, but a translation of the type of loan I'm talking about is called a good loan, and it's the nature of how it's structured is you do not have to pay profit, or there's no risk sharing mechanism in this type of a loan, because what it goes out to do is serve very particular humanitarian purposes and needs, or particular social needs. So for example, if you have an NGO or a nonprofit within the country that is doing work within education, then this type of a loan can be structured either through the financial institutions or through other entities, and diaspora can tap into this if they have a particular interest for hybrid models of investment products. So again, that's one example. And then you have microfinance institutions that are also working to develop the industry. So we have already two within Ethiopia, which is Raise Microfinance and Somali Microfinance, and and these institutions developing products that are of interest to the diaspora, or working collaboratively with the diaspora to understand their needs of which industries they want to support, and then structuring things that are in alignment with that. And then most importantly, I think how Islamic finance can be incorporated within the country is really through education and awareness creation, because we can do all these things of talk about products, develop products, but if it is still not as yet understood, whether from a value proposition or whether from a faith-based position, and whether it's seen as a divisive thing or as a uniting, a potential uniting thing, then it's almost a lost conversation, right? So awareness creation, capacity building, and then finally collaborating with standard setting boards and institutions that have been working in this area for a long time. So I've mentioned earlier two institutions such as the Islamic Financial Services Board that almost all countries are signatories for. Kenya became a part of the Islamic Financial Services Board back in 2018, 2019, as a way to share best practices and also to be able to collaborate and build relationships with more mature markets and see how to localize some of these conversations. So I hope I have sufficiently quickly touched on what we can do in that regard.
All right. Thank you very much, Rahma, for that feedback to your question. Next question, as part of our panel discussion, is Ann Lawi, Managing Director of Pangea Trust. And the question is there any data that represents the views of locals, that is families and business, with regards to how diaspora remittances have benefited them? Ann Lawi, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Noah. But before I go, I see Vince has his hands up. So Vince, if you can quickly share your insights, and then I can go.
Yeah, thank you very much. So my name is Vince. I'm running a group which name is Belcash. And just to give you some ideas, we started in 2011 to invest in Ethiopia. And we have now 5 ventures which has been successfully rolled out. And one is Belcash. So Belcash provides platforms as a service to the financial services. One is in the solar sector, another one in the market sector, which has 1,300 SMEs connected, and 2 other in the distribution sector. But what I wanted to say is, first I wanted to congratulate all of you. The presentations are amazing. But what I wanted to say is to reinforce what Rama was saying. We have a platform in the Somali region. So we provide a platform under the name Hello Cash in the Somali region, which is around 8 million people. And that provides mobile money agency banking. And that platform, we started it in 2016. So this is like 5 years ago. 5 years ago. And it represents today 40% of all the transactions of the country in number. So when we started with that microfinance, that was nominated like so many microfinance, which changed now in Shibala Bank. Since this year, they had around 10,000 transactions daily, and they managed today to have around 250,000 transactions a day for a total valuation of $8 million daily. So it's absolutely true that Islamic banking is growing very, very fast in the country. Still a lot to do. And we also started to provide solar panel in that region. So I just wanted to confirm what was said by our sister a couple of minutes before, that there is a huge potential. And it's absolutely not that the non-Muslims are not allowed to be in that space. Thank you.
Thank you, Vin. In terms of how the diaspora networks have benefited from diaspora remittances. I think I would want to touch on what the report have been able to cite out. One, there is influence in the country and into the most of the African countries, like we know already, the diaspora remittances into the continent stood at 78 billion in 2021. So there is a huge potential right there. The question to us and what we have been able to find out from the report and the insights that have come out of the report is one, there is potential in providing information, the right information to be able to make the right investment decision. So apart from the inflow, remittances inflow that are coming into the continent, there has been expression of interest to explore investment for diaspora communities in the countries of origins that they come from. So that is very important to note. So first, there is potential, there is expression of interest. Secondly, what do we need to do? We need to provide education, we need to provide, create awareness, and also engage with the right stakeholders, regulatory bodies, and also
Okay, a little bit of a technical issue right there. I remember when Lul said he went to the right room and there was internet. I think right now Anne is heading towards the right
or
room.
rather,
Oh, there she is.
Sorry, did you lose me?
We had lost you for a moment, Anne, but you can just recap 2 steps back and we continue. Right. Thank you.
Okay, so I was saying, as the data shows from the report, there is potential interest in investing in impact-driven and society impacting activities and business and innovative solution. And that's where we see huge opportunity to tap into, because there is an interest. What matters is what mechanism and strategies that we put in place to be able to harness this as an opportunity. Money is flowing into the continent, into the country. We have seen that there is an opportunity. So how do we unlock that further to be able to benefit more? Lastly, also from the report, we have seen most of the diaspora networks want to establish business as an alternative way of investing. So that's also an opportunity, because that means if they co-venture and co-create businesses in the country of origin, then they are willing to invest in those businesses, meaning they co-create and work with local communities and families and friends and network back in the countries of origin. Thank you, Noah.
All right, thank you very much, and for that response. And I'm glad earlier on Vince jumped in and just reiterated what Rahma was sharing in terms of how the Islamic financing, it's gaining traction by the day, and that information gap is being reduced also. So that is a good thing. But I would just want to bring Vince onto a different aspect of it, running a company, and now you are handling majority of the transactions in Somalia. I mean, looking at opportunities, what would you say are the opportunities that lie in, other than what we've outlined at the report? Are there other investment opportunities that can be adopted as well, especially utilizing remittances in the ecosystem that you're talking about? Over to you, Vince.
Yeah, I think that one of the things you need to be careful about is sometimes effectively the regulation in Ethiopia can be very much confusing. When you come from countries like Kenya, I'm myself originally from Senegal, even if I grew up in Ethiopia. So I don't have yellow papers. I don't have specific privileges. So the way we will look into the opportunity was in three levels. We were hesitating between Kenya, Nigeria, and Ethiopia. We came to the conclusion that Nigeria was, the competition will be very, very rough. And the potential of Ethiopia is bigger than the potential of Kenya, because Kenya, a lot of things are already established. For that reason, we went for Ethiopia. And to be honest with you, 10 years ago, we didn't realize how difficult it will be. But when I look to the rules of 10 years ago and today, today is a piece of cake versus 10 years ago. So first, you have way more clear regulatory frame and way more open. And then you should always look into, is this something that you can enter as a foreign investor or not? So the first thing I would say to the diaspora is, if you already have a business, look to the opportunity to extend your business to Ethiopia, you and your partners. And I expect your partners to be Ethiopian, but maybe also not Ethiopian. And you will see that in the tech sector, there is tremendous opportunities and it's open. In the financial sector, you can be on technology, but you cannot be moving money. So don't make a mistake. I'm absolutely not the one who are moving $8 million a day. I'm providing the tech platforms who allow that. Just like we will provide mobile money to Telecom. And the name of, so I don't operate it, but I provide the platforms. And that means data center, call center facilities, software, and so on. And we will make a fee per transaction. So when we started, we looked to the frame, and then we looked also to what is the exit plan and what is a Forex issue. So we came to two conclusions. First, as much as possible, you need to be or in something for export, or you must avoid to be using Forex. That's one. If you are selling cars and you're importing cars, I don't think it's a good business, because getting access to the Forex is difficult. And I can give you an example like our solar business. Whatever we import, and we do pay as you go. So people we import, we assemble, and then we provide it to the farmers. And you see they pay by installment. But our biggest problem is it's not to sell it. We as soon as it is assembled, it's sold. But after that, to get Forex is difficult for us. So that is something that I hope will be fixed in the years who are coming. And then when it comes to, I heard somebody saying that access to dividends was a lot of paperwork. I don't think so. Dividends is not a lot of paperwork. You have just to register properly your company one time, but getting the Forex to get it out, that you have to fight, because the banks, in fact, have a limited capacity in terms of Forex. So it's not the paperwork which is an issue, it is the access which is an issue. And then you have different ways also to bring money to your, maybe to your main entity or whatever. It can be through royalties, it can be maintenance fee if you're in the software business, and that's all perfectly legal. I don't think it's more difficult than in another country, except that the Forex issue makes it difficult. So that is one of the things I wanted Noah to share with you. And I think that the last but not least, me, I have not in my friends, I have two types of investor here. I have people who just tried something, like they throw a little bit of money and they hope it will work. Most of them have not really been successful. And the other guys who really decided that we are coming home and we're going to try to do something. Very few failed, but it always took more time than they expected. And the ROI, the return of investment in Ethiopia, can be high. So that's like everything. It's hard to come in. But once you're in, don't think it protects only, it also protects you even as a foreign investor. So that is the advantage. And I recognize that if you want the easy path, is maybe not the easiest country on earth, but definitively Ethiopia will be 200 million people in 20 to 30 years. That is as big as the population of Europe. So think about that. Thank you.
Definitely. Thank you very much. Good, and I'm thinking about 200 million by 2030, Europe's population. That's a huge market. And they're talking about regulation. I'm glad you've touched on how regulations were 10 years ago compared to today. They're a little bit, I mean, it's like day and night. There is a lot of improvement. Of course, there's more that needs to be done. That's why I want to bring in Adish Alemaye, who is the chairman of Kazana Group, and they do plenty of investment in their portfolio. There are over 13 companies involved in diverse sectors. Adish, first of all, this issue of Forex, saying that, you know, banks are giving better deals to people who are dealing in foreign currency compared to the local currency, Ethiopian bill. Maybe touch on that, why that disparity. Are there any policies that should be encouraged or should encourage banks to promote local investors? And lastly, where can we find data on success rate of MSMEs in Ethiopia? Quite a bunch of questions right there, but Adis, you can address them briefly. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Just like Uncle Vince said, it's a great panel. I enjoyed the report. It's something that I've been keen on. One of the biggest issues in the question you asked, the second question at least, in regards to data and information, it's one of the things that it's hard to do business in Ethiopia, mainly because there's a serious lack of data and information on everything. And it's just not just on the remittance platform, on fintech, on banking. You can pick any sector. There's a serious gap in data. And I actually see that as an opportunity because, I mean, like every business, lack of information is for me is an opportunity. So for anybody that's listening out there, for us people that are out here doing investments in Ethiopia, if you're looking at setting up a data resource center, you will have a ton of business because we lack some serious data, and both the government as well as the private sector as well as the donors. That's one. And even if the data is available, I don't think it's shared widely enough. It's probably sitting on somebody's laptop somewhere, and that's another major issue. So on the data, lack of data issue, I agree, I concur. We have to invest a substantial amount of resources towards making a decision in a certain sector because it's not available readily. And for me, that's an opportunity for someone to pick it up and actually go out there and start collecting data and offering that for third parties such as ourselves as well as others. In regards to the bias of banks to work with diaspora vis-a-vis local entities, I mean, I've been back here 21 years now. I was one of the crazy ones to come back fairly early. Like Vin said, Ethiopia it's a different place. We're still going through the motions. The last 4 years has been, a total sort of a disruption of business as usual in regards to the flurry of new policy and directions and directives that are coming in from various sources within the government. At least now we have, a clear-cut sort of plan and strategy in terms of where the government wants to go, and a clear agenda is obviously job creation. We have a huge youth jobless issue in the country. The average age is 18, 110 million people. You can just imagine the number of graduates that are coming out and that don't have that opportunity for a job. So entrepreneurship, youth entrepreneurship, diaspora entrepreneurship, anybody that's out there that can come back and create jobs, whether it's local or outside, I think is encouraged. I think it's too early to judge this government in regards to the policy implementations because it's been a fairly difficult sort of three years for us. I'm hoping that going forward things will settle down and we can get back to business as usual. But I mean, just given the fact that we've just opened our telecom services, the Prime Minister just announced that the banking sector will be opened up. These are some of the key constraints for business, whether local or outside. So we're fairly excited about what's about to happen. I think Ethiopia is sort of that giant that's been sleeping for a while, and when it wakes up, it will literally be a major force to be reckoned with on the continent. I'm more optimistic today than I've ever been in regards to the opportunities in Ethiopia. And we put our money where our mouth is. We've invested in over 18 entities and startups. I'm part of the First Angels group that was set up by 6 diasporas actually, that we put our resources together and hear pitches, and we invest our own money and mentor and help these companies grow. We've also done that through Kazana Group. We're in everything from manufacturing to IT to logistics. We're looking at hospitality and agriculture and manufacturing as well for more investment. So for us, in all honesty, there's a ton of us that are here doing stuff. They're not talking about it. That's the problem. I don't think it's communicated enough. There's a ton of people that I know personally that have come in and invested either with strangers or with their families, but they're not out there, communicating and talking about it. Ethiopians by nature are very modest. We're not, we don't show off. We don't make noise. We don't we don't say we have this, we have that. We do it quietly, and there's a ton of people that have done it. I mean, for example, the last manufacturing investment that we made, there's 2 diaspora friends that I just sent an email and said, I'm about to invest in this venture. Here's the business plan. Here's the approval from the bank. Are you guys in or out? And they were both in. And 2 years later, we have 45 full-time employees. We're about to expand into 150 employees. Everybody's happy. So I think there's a huge drive and want from the diaspora to invest in the country. The lack of direction, the lack of information, the lack of resource to do so is what the challenge is. And that's where I put the challenge to both the government as well as the development community out there, SIDA or anybody else, to help in that gap. That's where the gap is. The gap is, give us the information that we need to make clear, concrete decisions on investment opportunities. And then for the government, I know the government is working on a startup policy. I know that I've seen the draft going around. There's also policy around fintech that's changing on a continuous basis. So it's a very exciting time. When Vince started some 10 years ago, we thought he was crazy. I mean, I thought he was crazy, but he's been patient and he's made it work. And then there's another 100 Vinces that are ready to pop up. So for me, it's a very encouraging time to be in Ethiopia. Can we just keep it a secret? Please just don't tell everybody about Ethiopia at the moment. For guys like myself and Vince, we want to grab a piece of the pie before there's a mad rush from the 5 million diaspora sitting out there. So I'll leave my answer at that.
All right. Thank you very much, Adis, for your input. Of course, as you say, Ethiopians, you guys are very, very humble, so to put it. And it's different here in Kenya, man. If I do something small, my friend, you'll know about it. Very important, yeah? We hit our chest, that's the confidence, but we need to bridge that information gap that you've spoken about. Right now, I want to bring in
Africa, Virgin of Nigeria. Between you guys and the Nigerians, you make all the noise, and by the look of the amount of VCs that's coming into Africa, it's a share between Nigeria and Kenya. And every time there's some award from some donor giving out startup awards, is usually the Nigerians and the Kenyans. So we're tired of it. We are really tired of you, Kenyans and Nigerians. The Ethiopians are coming. We're quiet, but we will take over. Watch us.
Definitely. Actually, now you said you're a businessman. There's always an opportunity to I can come and do capacity building for Ethiopian people, how to make more noise, so that these FDIs can come your direction. But I'm glad that you've given an insider's perspective. Very important. I want to bring in Vera Barrett, because somebody might be here and is like, just men talking. Because Vince now is men with great beards. Now I want to bring in a lady. Just the other day we celebrated International Women's Day, and I'm glad that it was an amazing time. Vera, I know you handle regional programs at SIDA. Tell us about, aside from Pangea Trust, which has been very critical in the report today, what other platforms are there that provide information on investment, especially at such a time we've seen from our 2 previous speakers that there is an information or data gap?
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you to all the speakers today. It's been an interesting session, knowing and learning what is happening in Ethiopia. And like Anne mentioned, you find that the diaspora and the international community, they're looking to invest in impact projects and innovative ideas. And for some reason, the main issue is always trust. But in the past few years, we've seen some platforms that are coming up, maybe not doing exactly what Pangea is aiming to achieve, but also it's something that they can, it's still crowdfunding of some sort. So one of the platforms that we see is almost similar to what Pangea does is the SDG investment platform. It's a platform run by the UNDP, and it's focusing on leveraging the financial gap that is required to achieve the SDGs. And mostly they aim to use the private sector capital in delivering these SDGs. For this SDG platform, for example, it targets mostly institutional investors, but I believe at some point it will also target individual investors. And we have another one that we have worked with before, and it's called Lend a Hand. And it's also an impact investment platform that targets both individuals and SMEs. And they focus on sustainable initiatives or initiatives that focus on the SDGs. The other one is Trine. Trine specifically focuses on solar energy in the sub-Saharan Africa region. And we have, of course, from the report, we have the We Do Africa, which works with the Africa Diaspora in Europe. And they've worked with Kenya, I think Ghana, and now they're also working with Ethiopia. So, and closer home, we also have the Addis Angel Investors Network, I think, that also work with such kind of crowdfunding for investments in the region. So these are some of the, I would say, more international platforms that are used to by investors to find out where to invest in, and the diaspora can also tap on these platforms. Here in Kenya, we have Victoria Investments, who also do a similar use a similar platform to what Pangea is aiming to do. So there are just a few. It's not the same, but they're, I believe, in the same ecosystem, and they are probably going to work together in some way. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, Vera, for that response. Now, I want to bring in this particular gentleman. I think Addis touched on the issue of an average age in not only Ethiopia, which is 18. In Kenya, we are also a very young population, and there is the issue of employment. And Amadou Dafe, who's the CEO and co-founder of Mdpa Inc., these are Pan-African freelance talent marketplace that identifies the best of African talent and matches them with the cutting-edge projects from selected customers. And that's very important, doing something about the job crisis in this country, especially with the technological evolution. How can you utilize that? Amadou is doing that. So the question to Amadou is, what is the impact of diaspora remittances on the growth of Ethiopia's economy? And I think that this has been touched slightly here and there, but you can go slightly deeper. And also, do the channels used for remittance affect the economy in different way? Amadou, the floor is yours.
Noah, I think that I had Amadou this morning, and he is actually sick. So if I don't make a mistake, he's not attending he apologized. I think he took contact with some of you. So I don't think he's in the panel actually.
Oh, okay. That's glad to know. And even as as a moderator, you have to think fast. But when you see a hand up, it's sort of a savior. Come to think of it. So Vince, you are my savior this afternoon. What is your point? Kindly unmute.
Yeah, maybe I can just explain a little bit what Amadou is doing. Amadou, by the way, is my nephew. So you see that he is not the one, I'm not the one who brought him to Ethiopia. Let's be very clear about that. He came with his Ethiopian partner, Emmanuel. And basically what they are doing, they are training in the IT space young people. And they are very successful in what they are doing, and they are putting them on the global market. So they give intensive training to how do you call it, young IT people. We have more than 10,000 IT people a year who are coming on the market, which is huge. And that gives them the possibility to have a very, very straightforward selection. And they will train these people. They will finance that training, if I don't make a mistake. And then these people are put on the global market. And it's one of the most successful cases I've seen, not only in Ethiopia, but even on the continent. So that is maybe what I can say about Gebia. Gebia means market in Amharic, for your information. So they have been finding a way also to mitigate the issue of Forex, because they are mainly paid by customers who are paying them in Forex. So that's what I can say about the business of Amaduno.
Okay, thank you very much, Vince. I think I need to check my family. That's a great family. Wow. And you guys are doing great things. Don't know where my sister is. Anyway, we'll have that chart later on. I want us to look at some of the general questions that have been coming in from our chat section. And I know it's 4 minutes to 5 East African time. So let us just go through these questions very quickly. I know the first question was in terms of could you explain what is SIDA's role towards the Ethiopian diaspora investment, what their contribution and what their benefits as a government agency involved in this particular project? Sophie, you had your hand up. Maybe I could give you an opportunity to give a response towards that, Sophie.
Yes, thank you so much. I actually just sent also a written response because I think the question is so important and interesting. So why is SIDA as a donor entering into this initiative? First of all, I would like to say this is not business as usual. SIDA as a donor, we normally enter into long-term financial commitments, allowing for finance to be allocated for a specific purpose, for a specific program. But here, in fact, we have entered into a partnership with Pangea Trust in a pilot and as a partner to really allow Pangea to explore how to accelerate diaspora investments for MSME development in Africa. And this is something entirely new for us. To enter into this type of partnerships with a new actor, someone from the local ecosystem, to really allow ourselves and combine our efforts to explore, to be brave, to seek out new innovation and opportunities to unlock financial inflows so important for development. So I think that is overall the rationale and the role for us as a donor for doing this. And what do we expect in terms of benefits? Again, this initiative gives us an arena, a platform to together with a partner, trusted partner, to test new ways of solutions and to test it closely with actors in the ecosystem and above all with the diaspora. I think that has been extremely exciting during this pilot that Pangea has been excellent in reaching out and secure involvement of the diaspora, because ultimately, we want to explore how to further work together with the diaspora as an agent for change, for development in their home countries. So the role that we have committed to and the benefits are enormous. And we think this is such a great opportunity for us to learn, if we want to become more of a development broker, how do we do that? Instead of just allowing for finance being allocated. So, yeah.
All right. Thank you very much, Sophie, for responding to that question. Sophie, on to the next question. It is directed to Rahma. She tackled the issue of Islamic finance in detail, and one of the features she outlined is that it is asset-backed. But the question is, would Islamic finance be suitable in transacting NFTs and blockchain-based assets? These are not to gain value from sentiment and subjective opinion. Maybe you could give your feedback towards that, Rahma.
Sure. I think, Noah, just to understand your question, you had mentioned whether NFTs and the likes are compliant. Is that the question? Just for me to understand.
Yes.
So in Islamic finance, nothing is prohibited unless it shows to be in uncompliance. So within NFTs and cryptos, there have been various discussions amongst scholars, and there are different opinions, like in most cases where you have new matters. And there are those that support it and those that don't. But for each case, I don't want to give general legal opinions. We would need to understand what the specificities are. But a general rule of thumb in the principle is everything is allowed unless it falls under the categories of those that are disallowed. And I'd earlier shared what those prohibited things are. Yeah. So I hope that it's difficult to give very specific opinions because I don't want to then be misquoted as having given a legal opinion unless I understand fully the case. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, Rahma, for that response. Another question that was directed to Lawi from which country? I think this was tackled earlier on in the report, but from which country is Ethiopia receiving the highest value in diaspora remittances in terms of transactions and volume, and which remittance solutions are popular in Ethiopia? Anne?
Thank you for that. I would want to direct this question to Omalayo, and then I can add. So Omalayo?
Thank you. I'm happy to answer that. So the top remittance sending country formally to Ethiopia is the USA. And so according to the National Bank of Ethiopia, 387.1 million USD was sent to Ethiopia in 2020. So that's about 16% of the total that they received that year. But just to clarify, that is only formal remittances, and the most popular method of sending remittances to Ethiopia is informal methods. And so that just means things like carrying it by hand when you go travel, giving it to an agent who then has a partner on the other side who pays out. So there's a lot of money that flows to Ethiopia that way. And we just don't have a number for that. But the World Bank estimates around 50 to 70% of remittances to Ethiopia flow through informal channels. Thank you.
Thank you, Omalayo. And for me, that's very important insight in the sense that there are remittances that are formal and the informal channels. And the question that we sought out to understand also as part of this process is what are the motivations? What are the diversions? What are the attitude and what lead into that? And we have had a lot in terms of regulation, in terms of educations, in terms of incentives, and in terms of how can we incentivize diaspora to see opportunity just beyond the remittance inflow and what they are meant to do. And for me, this is important because the current remittances inflows that we are talking about have been classified quite well, which largely goes into the family. So we need to explore how does that impact the remittances inflow for alternative investment mechanism, which I would agree with things. This, as they said before, that's a huge opportunity, and that's why we are collecting data to inform what solutions, which mechanism, which type of education and capacity building for businesses and diaspora networks that we have to put in place to activate this.
All right. Thank you very much, Anne. I know even Dubo, as said there, outlining the negative and the positive impacts of such remittances, especially the informal one. And I know Vince, and this an open out from the precedents that you've set. If you put your hand up, I cannot miss you. Yeah. So Vince, you can proceed. If you have any other speaker who has a point, just put your hand up so that I can also recognize you. Vince, proceed.
Yeah, I would like to say that we ourselves have built platforms in the remittance space for the local banks. So it's clear that when you bring Forex to the country, you can get a lot from the banks. Somebody mentioned that you need a collateral for 240%, but I guarantee you, if you bring remittance, you may get a collateral of 50%, because the banks are very, very eager for that remittance. So you can absolutely negotiate if you are a diaspora when you're bringing the money in. The second thing I would like to say to people who are investing, when they say that, like in my sector, the value-added service sector, the minimum is $150,000 that you have to invest. And if you have an Ethiopian partner, and $200,000 if you do not have an Ethiopian partner. But that money is yours. With that money, you can use it to buy equipment, to buy certificates, to buy. So don't think is that the cost of the license is not 200,000. The cost of entering in the country is 200,000, and that's a confusion I've seen very often with investors. So last but not least, I would like to say that the verb of Addis Alemayo is a most recognized verb in Addis Ababa. For your information, Noah. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. I really appreciate. I know. I mean, having just 2 hours to go through such a detailed report and how this investment opportunities and how we can channel more funds toward our startups is not enough, to be honest. It's not enough. So I'm glad that people have been asking for the report. It will be mailed to you. Interact with the report. Our channels of communication are very open. We've shared our mails with you if you have any questions, and I'm glad even our panelists have been able to share. If you haven't shared your mail, maybe somebody might want to interact with you later on and to seek specific answers, especially if the people on the ground, the likes of Vince, Addis, they will become very handy. And even if you want to learn more about Islamic financing, Rahma is there, Sophie, they're doing amazing work with SIDA and Matters Partnership. So it will be critical for these to go on. All right. But at this particular moment, it's 7 minutes past 5 p.m. here in Kenya. I don't know what time it is in Nigeria. How many hours should I subtract? I'll talk about that and Google later. But Omolayo, I know is it morning in Nigeria?
Oh, we're 2 hours behind Ethiopia.
Oh, all right, I see. But they're saying they're coming for you in terms of investors putting their money into startups. I know Nigeria and Kenya are always ahead, making a lot of noise based on what Addis was saying. Anyway, I'd like us to close, but you can't close without allowing the owner of the house to close and the people who facilitated this particular platform. So in terms of giving our closing remarks, I'd like to welcome our wonderful host. And you've been such a gracious host. You've served us tea virtually. Ethiopian tea, is it Ethiopian coffee? Is one of the best. So please, the floor is yours. Give us closing remarks before you send us away into our respective work.
Thank you so much, Noah. But before I say a few words as closing remarks, I just wanted to touch on the last questions that have come through using investments as a peace tool in Ethiopia, bearing in mind currently the country is going through the civil war. And I believe I have seen one of the key findings that we have found out in the report is that diaspora have been used for the longest as a mobilization tool to bring people together. And I see that also as a tool to be able to bring the cohesion, to bring about the dialogue, to bring about the conversation between the different people at different level of the society. And it being a voice, we can utilize it better by harnessing the benefits that come from that. One of them, yes, being the unlocking of investments that we are talking about, but also unlocking the support of the businesses. We also saw in the report that lack of market opportunities and information on how you can unlock investment is a key barrier to growing business in Ethiopia. And this is a platform where we can provide or diaspora can provide information in terms of what market linkages are they able to provide. Can there be market entry to new markets using diaspora as a platform? So I see, and I have seen a lot when there is conflicting or conflicting diaspora interjecting or coming in place and being utilized as a tool for peace. And I think this is something we can build on and be able to amplify, like we have all the speakers have said, Vince, Addis, and the rest. And when we were on the ground, it was very exciting time for the businesses and entrepreneurship networks, seeing the opportunities that can be built by harnessing the diaspora network as a tool for peace, but also as a tool of building business and capacity building and access to markets. So closing this wonderful conversation, we are super excited of potential that comes with the dialogue and conversation. And like our partner SIDA Sophie said, we are exploring to see what tools do we use, how do we hold the conversation, how do we innovate together, how do we collaborate, what partners do we bring on board, and we are very open for this conversation. And also exploring other avenues like Lahama said, in terms of Islamic financing. And we are very excited to see that there is so much excitement, there's so much opportunities, we just need to build on. So thank you so much, and looking forward to see how we can build on and how we can be able to unlock more opportunities for SMEs and MSMEs in Ethiopia, because we know it's a key tool as an economic development tool, and especially impacting the bottom of the pyramid in the country. So thank you so much.
All right. Wow, Anne, thank you very much. And our able panelists and our wonderful people with speakers. That's the word I was looking for. I really appreciate your input. Amadou was not able to be with us, but Vera Obare, Regional Program Officer, SIDA, Sophie Baghat, Senior Advisor, Private Sector Development, SIDA HQ, Rahma Hersi, Matters Islamic Finance lawyer, and she's given us a masterclass right there. Omolayo Nkem Ojo, Research Manager, DMA Global Limited. Thank you for delving into the report and helping us understand that. Addis Alemayu, Chairman, Kazana Group, telling us on how things are happening on the ground. Vince Montaga Diop, and saying, the way things have evolved in the Ethiopian market and the opportunities also. And we also had Lul Wondemane, who's the program manager marketing system at the Swedish Embassy in Ethiopia. We really appreciate your input. And finally, Anne Lawi, Managing Director, Pangea Trust. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for giving your input. Let's continue interacting past these walls of a virtual room. My name is Noah Kipkemboy. I was your moderator. I'm a journalist, business journalist right here in Kenya, and I'm glad that I'm also creating contacts across East Africa and beyond to make sure that our startups and SMEs are funded adequately. Once again, thank you. Enjoy your afternoon, your morning, depending on where you are. God bless you. Keep the conversation going on our social media platforms and on our mails. And very sana. That means you are blessed in Swahili. Choose. Bye, everyone. You can leave at your own pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.